Hello and welcome to the Undisputed MMA show presented by the FTN Network. My name is Jonah Shiffman. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, John Kelly. We're going to be talking UFC 264 going down this weekend at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It's Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, the trilogy. The score is currently 1-1. They will settle said score this weekend. 13 fights, so obviously a pretty nice DraftKings slate. Whenever we have a Conor McGregor headline card, DraftKings comes out with pretty big prize pools. We have a $200K to first tournament over there this weekend. A bunch of bets for me. John, I know you have a bunch of action on the card as well. Conor McGregor, the press conference ended an hour ago. I'm not sure it felt like the old Conor per se. I know you just woke up, so you didn't see the press conference, but there's a different feeling about a Conor McGregor fight week. It's not quite like anything else in combat sports or really entertainment in totality. So I'm certainly looking forward to this week. I'm sure you are too. How are you doing?
Yeah, man, there's always extra buzz in the air when Conor McGregor steps in the octagon. Whether you love him or hate him, the dude sells fights and he puts eyeballs on the sport. So nothing but respect from me. So I'm super excited to talk about this card. I know we have a lot of spots we agree on, and I think I have a feeling there's a couple that we might disagree on as well. So I'm excited to talk through it with you. Some DraftKings strategy, like you said, we got a big DraftKings slate as well. And just wanted to point out at the top of the show, everything at FTN Daily and FTN Bets is 100% free now. So this video is going to live on our iTunes, which we've had the Undisputed MMA show on iTunes. Be sure to check that out and subscribe. It's also going to go up on YouTube as well. And of course, everything at ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com, completely free. So go check that out. We definitely appreciate it. But yeah, I'm excited to break down the fight with you and ready to get started.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned we'll be on FTN Network YouTube. We'll be on your personal YouTube. In addition to that, live streaming on Twitter. It'll be up on iTunes, Spotify, all those normal places. But we're excited to be bringing more content, just reaching more people, having the ability to talk fights with all you guys. I love doing the live shows because we get those comments rolling in. I see Felix Levine in the chat. John, I know you did a show with him the other week. That guy has been on my nerves for about the last 10 years of my life. But I'm excited to talk about the fights. We do have 13 of them. I don't want to go too long. I know we have a tendency to run long on these longer pay-per-view cards with exciting main cards. So without further ado, let's get started, John. We got a banger to start the night, and a banger that I think you're actually invested in. And I said banger facetiously, but I'm pretty sure this is a spot you have a bet on. We haven't done much talking this week. I kind of like when we do the show without talking much before. I think it just leads to a kind of more natural conversation. But we have Alen Amedovski looking for his first UFC victory. He's minus 130, $9,000 on DraftKings against Yaozong, who's plus 110, 7.2K. He's also looking for his first victory inside the UFC. So these are two guys. There just aren't a ton of data points on them for me. Amedovski was shut out versus Krzysztof Jotko a few years ago, got knocked out by John Phillips in 17 seconds in his most recent fight, which happens to be like 2 years ago. John Phillips, not very good, went 1-5 in the UFC. His one win over Amedovski. On the other hand, Hugh, I think there's some upside here. I mean, if you look at his Instagram, which I'll kind of let you talk on, he seems to be in good shape. He's 26 years old, but the guy hasn't shown much besides a good chin and pretty good cardio inside the UFC. And this Chinese Performance Institute that we've seen a lot of fighters come out of recently just hasn't had much success as a gym. So I'm not rushing to the window to bet Hugh, but I might be the only one on the show who could say that. So, John, I'll toss this one over to you. Give me your take on our first fight of the night here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I was like, sprinting to the window. I wish I got in earlier at like the plus 150 because I do think that was a great bet. I still think there was value at plus 126 where I bet it, and he's taken a little bit of money since then as well. But yeah, I mean, you hit on all the main things. It's like, yes, it's a low-level fight, but I really don't get why Amedovski is the favorite in this matchup because he's really not that good. I mean, he definitely has power. He's going to wing some hooks. He's got power early. But we really haven't seen it materialize at the UFC level. And it's not that he can't win by knockout, but Yaozong, however you pronounce his name, he really has all the skills that I think you need to beat Amedovski. He showed off an incredibly, I believe earlier in the week, I called it stupid goon durability, just because he was able to eat so many of Rashad Coulter's biggest punches and just kept moving forward. You say what you want about him, super low level, but He's got decent cardio, and his offensive game is not bad. Like, he'll throw a lot of leg kicks. He works the body well. He can bully his opponents in the clinch up against the cage. So it's just, I think he's the more well-rounded fighter with good durability, and Amedovski's a guy that probably has to win by knockout early. So I'm okay with fading that with a more well-rounded fighter who also has more upside for improvements, much younger than Amedovski, coming off like a 3-year layoff. Yes, there was a USADA suspension, but I think the upside is clearly on the Yaozong Hugh side. And I think he's probably just a more well-rounded fighter at this point. So yeah, I took a little bit of plus money just for a unit at plus 126. And I still think it's bettable at any plus money, just because Amedovski, I think you're basically just fading around one knockout.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Look, like, I understand the upside play here, right? There's a 7-year age gap. One guy looks to be in the best shape of his life. The other one hasn't. We don't have data points on for the last few years. So I get that part of it. I don't want to spend too much time on the first fight of the night. I think we both acknowledge it's fairly low level despite our action on it. I wanted to ask you about DraftKings, John, because Hugh is $7,100 or $7,200, I should say, on DK. He's pretty clearly underpriced, and I think someone who on a 13-fight slate, when we have a massive favorite like Sean O'Malley, which we'll get to in a little bit, a main event where both fighters are in the mid-range and you're going to want to target them, I think a lot of ownership, just not even from people who are high on Hugh, but for people who need to save money somewhere, and you have a close to even money underdog at 7.2K, pretty clearly underpriced here. How do you approach that on DK? Are you getting over the field if the field's 35%? Are you getting under it, or just about at the field? You'll take the savings in some lineups, because this fight is minus 205 to end inside the distance. So there's clearly upside for both fighters, but I also think there's downside, right? Like, if 40% of the field has ownership on Hugh, and he goes out there and gets knocked out in the first round, then 40% of the field is drawing pretty much completely dead. So I guess, what's your take there in terms of the chalk that we're expecting on Hugh this weekend?
Yeah, I would actually be surprised if he's that owned. I haven't really thought about ownership yet, so I'm not sure if he's going to come in as, like, I don't know if he's getting buzzed by anyone else, but I'd be surprised if just because he's so low level, 3-2 professionally, hasn't fought in 3 years, coming off a suspension. Like, it's not like he's a lock by any means. I know Felix seems to think he's a UFC champion over there, but yeah, I mean, if he's 40%, I would be a little bit shocked. My original thought was maybe he'd be like 15 to 20%. And in that case, I do want to be overweight just because he is so cheap. I do think he has upside to score well. Could even see some control time if he mixes in the wrestling or even just the cage push a little bit. Shout out to CCC Triple C. He said low key, great play with control time. But yeah, so I mean, it really depends on where the ownership is on where I like to get my personal ownership. If he's 40, like you said, then maybe field average, maybe even a little bit underweight. Cause I mean, like you said, there is downside here. But I tend to think 20, 25%, and I probably want to be up around the 30, 35, 40, depending on how much confidence you put in it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I don't want to flex, but I am lifetime 1-0 on this show in terms of ownership projection bets. So if you're looking to make another one here, I definitely think he will rack up some significant ownership. I've done some thinking about it. There's just no one in that price range. Like, guys that priced higher than him, like Niko Price is priced higher than him, but the fight is less likely to land inside the distance. Price is plus 130, plus 140. Hugh very well may close a favorite here. I mean, the market is clearly on that side. So I do think it'll be interesting. I think I'm going to try to get underweight myself just because it's a natural leverage spot where Hugh is someone who everyone's gravitating to on a 13-fight slate, and I don't feel that great about it. So I'll probably be underweight in terms of DK, but that is 8 minutes on our first of 13 fights. So let's move on to our next one. We got Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He's a minus 300 favorite here, 75% implied favorite against Jerome Rivera. We got Zhalgas 9.3K on DraftKings, Rivera $6,900. I've heard some people throughout the week think that Rivera is a live underdog in this spot. For me, I just really don't get it because Zhumagulov is not someone who I'm high on necessarily, right? Like, this is a fairly low volume guy who will move backwards, is super susceptible to getting into a kind of low output, grinded out type of decision, I think, in a majority of his fights, but he's just a higher level fighter than Jerome Rivera. I mean, Jerome Rivera is pretty much, I mean, to be frank, he's bad at everything inside of the cage. I mean, he debatably lost on Contender Series. I remember having a conversation with you on this show before his UFC debut and saying, I don't think this guy's UFC level. Since then, he's gone 0-3, has been finished twice against a not super great strength of schedule. I mean, he's decent. He's a decent size for this weight class. He's moving down for this fight against Zhalgas. He has 6 inches of height, 6 inches of reach. I just don't think that he really brings any tools to the table that Zhalgas isn't capable of dealing with. And with Zhumagulov, I mean, it's hard to be minus 300 in a lower volume kickboxing fight, but we've seen this guy shoot 11 takedowns before. So I think there's grappling upside with Zhumagulov. In a fight that likely goes the distance, I don't know if I'm getting up there at $9,300 on DraftKings too much. I don't anticipate the field will be either, but I see no value in the betting line. I think Zhumagulov deserves to be a pretty decently sized favorite as he is. So are you on the same page as me here, John, or you got a different take?
Yeah, this one I don't really have a strong take on. I think Zhumagulov, the wrestling upside is very clear in this matchup. And I mean, I get it why people are attacking the dog side here. You can make an argument that the line is wide, but there's just no way I'm going to put money on Jerome Rivera. He just, like you said, not really a UFC caliber fighter. I mean, he's tall and lanky for the division, but doesn't know how to use his range at all, has terrible takedown defense, decent submission grappler in terms of like the finishing upside. But I mean, Zhumagulov has decent grappling as well, and I expect him to be on top for the majority of this fight. It's just like the wrestling upside is totally clear. I think the striking could be somewhat even. Zhumagulov does have some power. He might wing some overhands. Jerome Rivera might be able to get off on some leg kicks, out-volume him a little bit, but I just don't think it's going to stay on the feet too long just because the wrestling is so clear to me. So I think Zhumagulov probably just wrestles into decision. Zhumagulov is super expensive, but the wrestling upside is clearly there. I mean, if he lands 4 or 5 takedowns in this matchup, banks a bunch of top time, I think he could pay off that salary. So I wouldn't fade him completely. Yeah, I think Zhumagulov's a decent floor play here.
Yeah, I think the thing on this slate that kind of makes it a little bit tough towards the top of DraftKings, and I mentioned this already, we'll talk about it in depth later, is there's someone that the entire field is chasing in Sean O'Malley. I mean, he is a minus 1,000 favorite. Zhumagulov's the second biggest favorite on the slate, and he is not even 76% implied, right? Like he's minus 300. It's a big favorite, but like this guy loses a quarter of the time according to the market. I mean, Sean O'Malley wins his fight like 90% plus of the time, has more finishing upside. So with Zhumagulov, you obviously need him to hit a ceiling and O'Malley to probably perform well below his ceiling. So it's certainly possible. And with ownership, it may not be a bad play in terms of leveraging against the field. I just think in terms of like a raw points projection, I think it's going to be tough to get there to Zhumagulov in a cash game setting unless you're paying down to multiple spots, which I probably won't be this weekend. I don't love a ton of underdogs. Let's move on to our next fight. We got Brad Tavares, minus 160 or minus 170, I should say. He's $8,600 on DraftKings against Omari Akhmedov, plus 145 for the dog here, 7.6K. This is a sneaky decent fight, John. I let off the first two, so I'll let you get the first word in on this one. Tavares versus Akhmedov.
Yeah, this one's kind of one of my least anticipated fights of the night. Tavares, I think, probably is the better fighter all around here. Akhmedov does have some decent wrestling, but the gas tank is always an issue for Akhmedov. I never feel good about backing him. Did get the submission victory over Tom Breese in January, but let's be honest, we never really know what we're going to get from Tom Breese. So, take that with a grain of salt, but he's just a low volume dude on the feet, decent wrestling, decent grappling. He averages just under 3 takedowns per 15, but Tavares has shown really solid takedown defense. And again, I just keep going back to the cardio. So it's like, even if he wrestles, he's able to successfully wrestle him in the first round. I think he'll probably be too gassed to do that in the second and the third, even if he does get him taken down in the first. And I'm not even convinced that he will. So I think Tavares will be able to keep it on the feet. Tavares will be able to outpoint him. Tavares will take over later in the fight. So I have Tavares by decision here. Not a super hot take. I don't expect the winner to score well here. I think Akhmedov clearly has more wrestling upside in a win. So if you like Akhmedov, he's definitely the better DraftKings upside play. But yeah, I mean, I have Tavares winning a decision here. It's not a key target for me either way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. In terms of this fight, I think it's somewhat competitive for the first 10 minutes of the fight. I think Tavares is clearly the better striker. Akhmedov carries some power. We know he's going to get in the pocket, try to swing hooks. Tavares, I think, is the more crisp striker, like technically sound guy, wider kind of arsenal of strikes in his game. So I think it's remotely competitive for 10 minutes. Like, I think takedowns can win Akhmedov around. But in the third round, I mean, Tavares is a really big favorite. This is a guy who is battle tested. He's been in 5-round fights before. Akhmedov's been finished in the third round multiple times. In order for Akhmedov to have his, in order for him to maximize his win condition, he's going to have to wrestle in this fight. And anytime he wrestles hard, he gasses out. So I considered backing Tavares. I consider backing the over, although the over is blown out to like minus 200. I'm not really interested in backing that at one of the heavier weight classes here. So it's a pass for me totally on this fight. I think it's pretty high level. It's just, I kind of echo your sentiments, John. It doesn't feel that exciting on a big card here. So move on to our next fight, which some people in the comments are excited for. And I specifically asked John not to share the comment about it, and then he did. But we have Jennifer Maia minus 185, $8,800 on DraftKings. She takes on Jessica I plus 160 for I, $8,000. And, I think this line with Jennifer Maia, when I first looked at it, my first thought was, why does Jennifer Maia really deserve to be minus 185? I don't, rate either of these women as particularly good fighters, but I think the narrative here and the reasoning why she's minus 185 is because she clearly won a round off Valentina Shevchenko. Did she have a real chance to win the fight? No. Did I try to get down as much money possible on Valentina minus 300 live after she lost that round? Absolutely. But to be honest, I dug more into it. Their striking and grappling metrics kind of line up similarly, right? They both have a negative striking differential, both sub 60% takedown defense. I think the differences here just lie like Maia is a better submission grappler than Jessica I. She might be more likely to take her down, and I think she hits harder on the feet. So to me, Maia is the more dangerous fighter. That's not saying a ton considering the fight's minus 300 to go the entirety of 15 minutes. So it's a pass for me. I do think Maia deserves to be a favorite. Is it maybe a little wide at minus 185? Sure, but I'm not necessarily rushing to the window to bet Jessica I in this spot. So, John, what are your thoughts here? Any action on Maia versus I?
Yeah, you're not rushing to the betting window, but you might be rushing to the OnlyFans because rumor has it. No, I'm not. I mean, this is another fight. I'm just trying to breeze through these ones so that we can get to the fights where we actually have decent stuff to talk about. I've never been a fan of Jessica I, her fighting style, and it seems like she's not even in her prime anymore. Just watching her recent fights, it just, I never get super interested. You can definitely make an argument that the line is wide though, and we've seen a little bit of I money coming in over the past 24 hours because Maia did actually touch like minus 210, minus 215 on a couple books. So it seems like people are starting to come around on Jessica I, and I get it just because it's like, both of these women are decent boxers. I expect this to be a kickboxing match. You mentioned the round against Shevchenko for Maia, and that's kind of why this line is where it is. That was the first takedown she's landed like in the UFC. So it's like, even though the takedown upside is so clear as a path to victory, Jessica I doesn't defend takedowns. I don't trust Maia to even go for takedowns, even though she's a better grappler and she could pretty much land takedowns at will. It's just like, I don't even know if she'll go for a single takedown. So I can't put any faith in her at this number or on DraftKings, because if this just is a striking match for 15 minutes, then we have like a close split decision type of fight. So I guess Maia by decision, but it's not a good feeling either way. And I really have no action on this fight whatsoever.
Yeah, we got a comment from Johnny L Football in the chat. He's asking any thought on Maia being so low owned, under 18% and being live for submission. I guess she is. I mean, she's live for a submission. She's like plus 500, plus 600 to win by submission. But if you think about it, it's only like a 15 to 20% chance. And she doesn't have much upside outside of a finish. But I will say, like, a lot of times with these women fight that are minus 300 to go the full 15 minutes, there isn't much downside either. So in a cash game setting, I mean, she's a decently sized favorite. She's up there in price for sure. But I think Maia has a pretty decent floor, assuming that she hits a takedown or two. We got MMA Fox in the chat, shout out, also known as John Stargarian. He's been on the show a few times recently. Jessica I equals elite bet. Maybe, but it's not for me. It's not for me this weekend. And also all the FTN people were in our Slack. I mean, people are hating on my hair. They're hating on the AirPods. The kid had an 101-degree fever last night. I'm out here going an hour and a half for a Conor McGregor pay-per-view. They better start putting some respect on my name, man. And we've only gotten through 4 fights. I'm already starting to get nasally. Congestion's building up. Let's move on. Let's keep it going. Keep it rolling quick. Actually, my first bet of the night on our next fight, we got Dricus du Plessis. He's minus 115, $8.2 thousand on DK against Trevon Giles. Comes back minus 105. It's smallest of underdogs, $8,000 on DK for Trevon Giles. Look, I tried to fade Dricus his first time out. It was going pretty well for 3 minutes, and then Marcus Perez died to a shot behind the ear, and that was it. Trevon Giles is someone who I think is actually pretty good. His striking metrics check out as borderline elite. I mean, this guy does not get hit much. His boxing is pretty crisp. He is pretty kickable on the feet. I will say that's probably the biggest hole in his game. Outside of the whole, I don't know if it's like a tangible skill, but Trevon Giles, his 2 losses in the UFC. First of all, he's 5-2. I feel like everyone thinks he has a way worse record than he does. His 2 losses have both come via guillotine in the 3rd round. Wasn't losing either fight really by a ton before that. The problem with this guy is it feels like he should be so much better than he is. And I kind of wrote about that when I played him this week at minus 110 in the FTN Bets tracker that's now free on ftnbets.com. I just kind of wrote, like, Trevon Giles, this is a hold your nose spot. Sometimes in the NFL, you have a team like the New York Jets going to Kansas City. They're plus 17.5. Does it feel good to bet them? No, but like the line should really be 14 or 14.5. So you have to take the value. To me, this feels like a hold your nose spot. Trevon Giles is a far more experienced fighter than Dricus du Plessis. I think he's a better fighter than him. And I think he's really just more well-rounded pretty much anywhere this fight goes. So does it ever feel good to be on Trevon Giles? Not necessarily. Am I looking forward to the fight on Saturday night? No. Is it probably going to be way more sweaty than it should be? Yes. But at less than 55%, I mean, Trevon Giles at minus 105 now, I'm keeping the sizing low, but I really do think there's a significant amount of value, at least in terms of the skill set here. Will he go out there and make it a lot harder on himself than he needs to? It's very possible he blows it, loses the fight, but at minus 105, I just feel like I have to take the shot. I saw a couple raised eyebrows from you, John, during that breakdown. Are you on the other side in this fight, or you just don't think Trevon Giles is as good as I hypothetically think he is?
Yeah, I mean, it just, like you said, it never feels good to have money on Trevon Giles. It's like he really should be better than he is. You know, he has a decent boxing skill set, just way too, timid, doesn't let his hands go enough. Even when he has his opponents hurt, just doesn't do enough for me, never puts his foot on the gas. And it's like, you know, other than not doing enough and having a terrible fight IQ, we saw in the Roman Delite fight, like he literally could have won by knockout multiple times, decided to clinch up and grapple a little bit. But aside from the fight IQ, aside from not putting his foot on the gas pedal, the cardio is just not good as well. So there's another red flag. So there are concerns. You kind of highlighted the reasons to think there's upside on Giles. So just to play devil's advocate, those are a couple of concerns I would have with backing him. So then you look at who he's fighting against, and it's like, I have no interest in backing du Plessis because Giles is the better fighter. Du Plessis, while he does have knockout power, like I'm not even sure that the knockout power is that real at the UFC level. You know, most of those came in KSW. Obviously, you know, he did knock out Marcus Perez, but he was kind of getting his ass kicked up until that point. And you go back and watch some of his regional footage as well. He gets dropped quite a bit, you know, for a guy with such like a high guard, like he lets a lot of punches sneak through, gets dropped quite a bit. And yes, he's able to sort of recover and overcome that adversity and sometimes find a finish himself later. But that's just not really someone that I'm looking to back. So while I trust du Plessis to do a little bit more than Giles, I think he's probably outskilled on the feet, and maybe Giles sneaks a couple through, hurts him. It's just like, you know, Giles will just do something that Giles does. Like maybe he hurts du Plessis and like jumps into grappling and in the later rounds gets subbed or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly fine passing at the current number. In terms of DraftKings, theoretically, I think du Plessis has a little bit more upside, but I'm not even sure that an early KO is that live here. So I'm kind of just passing on this fight altogether. I think there's better ones that you can target that we're going to get to here in a few fights.
Imagine passing a fight when you can see the more skilled fighter, the more tested fighter is an underdog. Could literally never be me. Timothy in the chat says, like betting Nick Kyrgios in tennis. I'm not sure who that's supposed to be insulting, but Nick Kyrgios won me or not really Nick Kyrgios, more like Josh Gross of FTNbets.com won me or FTN Daily won me $6,000 on tennis this weekend. Or so I'm not going to be hating on any Nick Kyrgios. There will be no Nick Kyrgios slander in the chat of the Undisputed Show. Next up, we got what I think is probably the second best fight of the card. I mean, this is one that I'm seriously looking forward to. John, I know you are too. I mean, look, so it is, what time is it for you, John, right now?
6 a.m., brother.
It is 6:03 a.m. in the morning where John is. We were talking a little bit before the show. He got up early to chop it up with me, and he goes, I think I'll actually be awake once we get the Ilia, Topuria, and Ryan Hall fight underway. So we'll do just that. We got Topuria minus 240, $9.1 thousand on DraftKings. Hall, big underdog for the Wizard, plus 205, 7.1K. John, once you swallow that gulp of water, I wouldn't dare be the one to start this fight. I will let you go first here, Topuria versus Hall.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to say. You know, I can go on for hours on why Ryan Hall is clearly decided this matchup. Just to highlight a little things, so basically the way I attacked this fight, first off, I ended up betting Ryan Hall by submission, went to bet him at the open at plus 800, which is a stupid line. You know, FanDuel did that thing where they opened the submission props backwards, in my opinion, because Ryan Hall was plus 800. Topuria, I think, was plus 380 or something stupid, and those should have been reversed. So I went to bet Ryan Hall, literally moved as I was getting it in. So got it at plus 650, which we've obviously got some decent CLV there because now it's down to 340 on FanDuel, where it probably should be. So yeah, that's why we keep our eyes on the FTN bet tracker so we can snipe some good lines like that. Props to you if you did get it at plus 800. I think that's an excellent bet. So that was just the no-brainer. Regardless of even looking into the matchup, it's Ryan Hall's one of the most dangerous grapplers in the UFC. If he wins, it likely comes by submission. And so, yeah, so that's an obvious no-brainer bet. Then the more I dug into the matchup, the more I felt confident in Ryan Hall, and the more I think he's clearly decided. I think he actually could win a decision here. So I ended up backing him at the money line as well at plus 205. I know there's going to be a lot of Topuria love out there. And listen, I like the kid too. I bet him against Yusuf Zalal. I bet him against Damon Jackson. And he looked great in both of those fights. But there's something to be said about fighting Yusuf Zalal, who, he is what he is. That's a low-level fighter. And Damon Jackson, who's not even a homeless version of Ryan Hall. And Damon Jackson's more of a grappler. If you watch the fight, for some reason, he thought he was Justin fucking Gaethje because he was just moving forward, winging hooks. Terrible game plan by Damon Jackson, but it gave Topuria the easy path to victory. Topuria is a great boxer, got good power. He killed the body. His boxing looks super sharp. But if you think Ryan Hall is going to do that, going to give Topuria that type of game plan, I seriously question how you think this fight is going to play out, because it's no doubt to me that Ryan Hall is going to do his usual maintain distance, which is what he's excellent at doing. And then as soon as his opponents close the distance, he's going to flop to his back. He's going to Imanari roll. He's going to engage in the grappling. So the reason why Ryan Hall has been able to win decisions is because his opponents are afraid to go to the ground with him, which makes sense. So he's able to maintain that distance, do his hook kicks, spinning kicks. He's got a bunch of good kicks. Posted a tweet thread earlier in the week. So definitely go check that out as well on why Ryan Hall is so exciting. So I just think he gets unnecessary hate here. But this is clearly the toughest test that Topuria has ever faced. No question about it. Nobody at the UFC level has been able to solve that Ryan Hall puzzle. And at minus 235, minus 240, you think a semi-unproven prospect in Topuria. I know, but a lot of people have him pegged as a future contender in this division. At minus 240 against the toughest test, against the dangerous grappler in this division. I don't see how he looks minus 240 here unless he's able to close the distance and hurt Ryan Hall early. And even in that scenario, if he does that, as soon as he lands, Ryan Hall is engaging in the grappling. He's flopping to his back, and Topuria is inexperienced and cocky and confident enough. And we've even heard it in interviews where he likely might follow Ryan Hall to the ground and give Ryan Hall that grappling that he wants. And I think that would be a major mistake here, because Ryan Hall is going to, he's going to snatch up a heel. He's going to engage. He's going to, he has super slick back takes as well. He's just so unconventional. Obviously the best in the 50-50 guard. And it's just like, I could see Topuria just giving him his window here. And you just never want to do that against a specialist like Ryan Hall. So I think Ryan Hall by submission is the way to target it. But also Ryan Hall, this could be a fight where we're questioning, like, did Ryan Hall just win that round off his back, like threatened with multiple submissions? People are so worried about defending submissions where they leave their face wide open. We saw it in the Gray Maynard fight, tagged him multiple times with the kicks. Darren Elkins dropped him with a spinning back kick as well. So there's just so many ways that Ryan Hall can cover this price tag. And I just seriously question that Topuria can cover minus 240 in the spot. So give me Ryan Hall, give me the Wizard, plus 205 for a unit, plus 650 by submission for half a unit are my plays on Ryan Hall. But yeah, tell me why I'm wrong and why Topuria is just going to nuke Ryan Hall early, which is what everyone seems to think.
I'm not everyone. I don't think that. I think that was a good breakdown. Johnny L. Football said in the chat, I can't doubt Ryan Hall after that Nikolai Negumarianu fight that John hit on a few weeks ago. And look, I mean, that was a pretty in-depth breakdown there. He went a few minutes. I think he had a great points. What stood out to me most was that you pronounced Yusuf Zalal's name correctly for, I think, the first time in the history of our show. And then you went back to calling him Zalil like 15 seconds later. So that kind of stuck with me throughout the entire thing. But in all seriousness, in terms of the matchup here, I think you make some decent points in terms of we had a comment that said Topuria by murder by Timothy, and John just skipped it. He's not putting it on the screen.
We don't need that business.
But, I think you make good points. Ryan Hall is most certainly the toughest test of Topuria's career. He's a guy who he's not going to engage in the striking. He gets hit, he's going to flop to his back and disengage. The thing that I think you may be ignoring, to be candid with you, is I think this is the most difficult task of Ryan Hall's career by a decent amount as well. I mean, you look at the guys he's fought in: Artem Lobov, massive hole in his game; Gray Maynard, declining fighter; BJ Penn, declining fighter times 1,000, and then Darren Elkins, human punching bag, who did not fight well. And I mean, Ryan Hall actually looked really good in that Darren Elkins fight, and I am a Ryan Hall fan. I think he's an exciting guy. I think he's super cerebral as a fighter. I think he maximizes his path to win every single time out. So I guess my take here is I think Topuria running through Hall and just landing one body shot in the first minute is pretty live. I think Topuria can just out-athlete him. I mean, Ryan Hall, he's a great grappler. He's put it together in MMA. I do think his striking is underrated. I think that's something that you didn't even touch on enough. I mean, this guy gets hit less than one time per minute inside the octagon. And it's not because he has the best striking defense in the world. It's because he's all the way out, and then if someone closes the distance to get in, he either dives at their legs or flops to his back, and no one wants to be there with this guy. I do think there's a decent chance that Topuria follows him down there, mostly because of his comments throughout the week. I made a tweet earlier, like, don't pay much attention to interviews, and I don't for the most part, but this guy is like, we could start in the 50-50 position. For those of you who don't know, that's like Ryan Hall's position. I mean, this guy has like hours of video out there on all sorts of things regarding the 50-50 grappling position. So I do think Topuria could be slightly overconfident, although I think that actually when Hall flops to his back, the best way to attack it, I think, is to get on top for a half second. You could get up after that. You don't want to get stuck in this guy's guard, but doing a little damage, right? Like make him pay for just lying there defenseless on his back. So I expect Topuria to approach it in a positive kind of direction in that realm. I think the striking, Topuria certainly hits harder. He's a better boxer, but Ryan Hall is an underrated offensive striker. I have not bet him at plus 205 yet. I think plus 650 on Ryan Hall would have been like close to a full unit bet, because I do think that Hall submission is a better bet than Hall money line, especially at that price. Now, I think there's a case to be made for plus 200. You don't want to get greedy and go get a method of victory when there's certainly, I think there's a path. I'd give Ryan Hall more of a chance to win a striking match than I think most people do. And it's not because he's a great striker. It's because he minimizes his opponent's striking. So I think Hall is live in this spot. In terms of DraftKings, he's one of those guys who probably needs a finish, which, he's more than capable. I was looking at the under earlier in the week as kind of my main spot for this fight. I don't think I'm going to get there. The price has kind of stayed even at -130 throughout the week. But with Hall, his upside is probably in the 80-point range if he's not getting a finish, because he's not a great takedown artist in terms of DraftKings. He's more of a roll for heel hooks or invite someone on top of you. He's not going to rack up a ton of control time. He's more of a submission over position guy, which is fine when you're a grappler of his caliber. I just think it's one of those things where he doesn't make for a great play on DK if he doesn't get that finish. We saw him mostly dominate the Elkins fight. That fight felt like it was pretty, I wouldn't say non-competitive, but it wasn't close for a large portion of it. And he put up 70, 80 DraftKings points in that fight. So I don't think the upside is great for Hall. Topuria, I think, has a lot of upside on DraftKings, right? Like he can win in round one. He could win with 10 minutes of top control. I think all of those things are in play here. But I think on the money line, some value in Ryan Hall. Early sublines, even current sublines are fine for Ryan Hall. DraftKings, I think I prefer Topuria, just the higher upside guy. But yeah, we spent a lot of time on that fight, but I think it's important. I mean, I think that's the second best fight on the card, or maybe third best fight. We should put some respect on the co-main event. John, you have anything to add here before we move on to another banger of a fight up next?
No, I'll just say, please start in 50-50, buddy. Let's see you do that. I promise you that'll be a bad decision. But yeah, we can move on.
John throwing down the gauntlet to Ilia Topuria. You heard it here first on the Undisputed Show. All right, let's move on. We got Michel Pereira. He's -170 favorite against Niko Price, who comes back +145 for Niko. The hybrid price, $8.9 thousand for Pereira, 7.3 for Niko Price. The story of Michel Pereira is pretty widely known at this point. I mean, he came into the UFC as this guy who had the cachoeira style. He was flipping. He was doing somersaults. He was dancing and gassing out on his way to the octagon. And then pretty quickly stopped after the Tristan Connolly fight, where he notoriously gassed out to a guy pretty much 2 weight divisions smaller than him, and lost in pretty embarrassing fashion. I think that he's pretty improved, though. I mean, he's not as exciting to watch as he used to be, but if you look at his last 3 fights, I mean, let's just pull it up real quick. His last 3 fights. So the first one is that the DQ against Diego Sanchez, which, I mean, goes down as a loss. He was pretty clearly winning. I think we could all agree he won the fight in terms of how to view him moving forward. Amedovski fight gets that rear naked choke that was debatable whether his opponent tapped in the end of the 3rd round. And then Chaos Williams, he goes out there and beats in a decision. I backed him in that spot. Pereira hasn't lost that many minutes over the last 15 minutes of fighting. And I think, or over his last 45 minutes of fighting, I should say. And I think that's pretty impressive considering what we thought of him at the beginning of his UFC run. So I think he deserves to be a pretty good size favorite here against Price. Niko Price is an exciting fighter. He's dangerous from literally anywhere a fight goes. We've seen him with wins via upkick, via wins via hammer fist off his back. I mean, the guy is dangerous for sure. He's not someone who I love laying -170 against. What I think is interesting here is potentially variance of the under. I mentioned how Pereira used to be super crazy. He has gone into the 3rd round now in 4 consecutive UFC fights. I think he's the value side on the money line, where I think the most value in the fight may lie is in the under. Niko Price has only been to a decision 1 time in the UFC. He's only started 1/3 round. Granted, it was in it was in his last fight against Cowboy Cerrone, who basically gets dusted by everyone he faces these days. So that's kind of a warning sign. But I don't know. Niko Price is slow and dangerous at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't think he's technically good. I think Pereira is really a much better fighter. But it feels like a volatile fight, one that's volatile that I'm not comfortable laying -170. I would be okay betting under 2.5, like -130-ish. I think that's where the current market is. I'm not rushing to the window to do so. I haven't decided whether I'll bet it, but I do think that's probably my favorite look in this fight. I do expect some form of violence. Niko Price just one of those guys who the fight's ending one way or another. He's a killer, be killed sort of guy. And Michel Pereira, although he's looked more composed in his last few fights, I have a feeling that there's a chance that he just goes out there and goes to war with Niko Price and puts on a show for all of us watching on Saturday night. So, John, do you have anything here kind of from a DFS perspective, maybe with Pereira up towards 9K and Price is a pretty cheap underdog at 7.3K? And if not from DFS, who do you like on the money line in terms of where the value lies in this spot?
Yeah, I think this is a good fight to target just because, like you said, I mean, you laid out the breakdown pretty well here. I think this is going to be a banger. I think this is going to be one that a lot of people are excited. I think you can easily target both sides of this matchup. Both guys hit hard. Both guys are powerful. I can see either guy hitting their win condition. The reason why I go back to Michel Pereira is because I think he's more durable. Niko Price been knocked out multiple times. Both guys can obviously win by knockout, but I trust his durability a little bit more. I think he probably even hits a little bit harder as well. Super strong for this division. I also think he has the wrestling upside. I think if either guy lands takedowns here, I think it's going to come on the Pereira side. So yeah, that's really what it comes down to for me. I think he has just a little bit more upside. Obviously, he's more expensive on DraftKings. If you like the underdog, there's definitely, I'm not going to knock anyone for chasing a dog and Niko Price here, especially since, like you said, we've seen him, the history of Pereira to, maybe not fight with the smartest fight IQ. This is a Conor McGregor card. I know they're not on the main card, but there's going to be a lot of fans going wild here. He's a showman as well. He might do something stupid just for the crowds, which is super fun to watch, but maybe not optimizing his win condition. So don't hate a Niko Price underdog spot. But like you said, I'm probably not counting on him to, up kick from bottom or something crazy, some sort of KO like that. So give me Michel Pereira. I think he's the side. I think if running multiple lineups, though, I definitely would get some Niko Price. Michel Pereira is not really somebody that I want to stake my night on or go all in on. So I would definitely get a decent split on both sides of this matchup.
Can we talk for a second about this fight being a prelim and the Ryan Hall Topuria fight? I mean, what are they like? We have Yana Kunitskaya on a UFC pay-per-view. Something named a Chris Moutinho is opening the card. I mean, I know the circumstances there, but the prelims on the ESPN prelims are way better than the first three fights on the main card. Don't you think?
So, I mean, anytime you can get Irene Aldana on a pay-per-view main card with Conor, you just have to do it. She got absolutely abused by Holly Holm. Let's give her a Conor main card spot so she can get abused by Yana Kunitskaya. No, I totally agree. One thing to counter it a little bit, the UFC does do they do try to put some, which obviously this, I'm explaining it to the fans if they don't. But UFC does try to put some of the better fights on the main card on ESPN to sort of build up to the main card and get you to purchase the main card. So even if the main card doesn't deliver as much, they already sucked you in with the main card. So yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, I think Pereira, Niko Price, decent fight to target. And one that you could get exposure to both sides for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, let's also be honest, the way the fights line up, it doesn't really fucking matter. I mean, anyone who's watching the show 43 minutes in, we're watching all 13 fights on Saturday. It is a appointment television, as they say. I'll be in my living room for the entirety of the 7 hours, maybe more. You never know with the Conor fight, how drawn out it is. I know they're expecting a lot of celebrities there. It should be quite the spectacle this weekend. So with that being said, let's move on to our final prelim, the featured prelim, as they call it. We got Max Griffin at -195, $8,700 on DK against Carlos Condit, +170, 7.5K for Condit. John, talk to me. What do you make of this fight? I think there's a lot of people on the Griffin side. He certainly has seen a bunch of money roll in. I think he's in the -160 range at the end of last card. So what is that? 13 days ago at this point. He's certainly seen the money come in. Carlos Condit was on a pretty bad skid for a second. Natural born killer towards the end of his career, I would say, but has strung together consecutive wins. What do you make of his chances here as a pretty sizable underdog to Max Griffin?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of always thought Max Griffin is better than he really is. He's just one of those dudes that I always seem to think is going to look better than he does. But in this matchup, I think it's pretty clear. Carlos Condit, respect to him, one of the legends. I know he's only 2 years older than Max Griffin, but in terms of fight years, he's got him, he's over the hill, especially compared to Max Griffin here. And I do think Max Griffin has a clear path to victory with his wrestling. Only averages 1.7 per 15, but he showed a willingness to wrestle more in fights where he does have that wrestling advantage. I do think he has a wrestling advantage here. I think he goes to that wrestling advantage. I think he lands multiple takedowns here. And I think he probably covers his price tag here, because I even think the striking is pretty close to even here. Griffin will go out there and throw volume. He's shown at times kind of suspect cardio, but then other times watching his fights, it's his cardio looks pretty good. So I kind of don't really know where his cardio's at in terms of if that's even an issue at this point. But regardless, I do think he has Condit pretty much covered everywhere. And I think the wrestling upside is pretty clear. So I think Griffin's a decent option to target just because I could see multiple takedowns. I could see some control time, and he's a decent volume guy as well. So yeah, I think Max Griffin is probably my preferred play here. Shout out to Tim. He said Condit is 107 years old in MMA. Yeah, I mean, no arguments here from me. So I won't be targeting the old washed up fighter in this matchup. But what about you, Jonah?
Yeah, so I kind of tried to set you up, get some differentiating takes on this fight. I actually bet Max Griffin. I bet him at minus 185. I want to say that was the last number I would play. I might have gotten 175. I think 185 is the last number I would play. I'll double check what number I got here in a second. I think it just kind of comes down to the things you said. I don't have a ton to add. Griffin, I think, is like actually good. I wrote in my FTN bets right up, like Griffin is someone who I'm looking as a bet on fighter, someone who I think is better than the market thinks at this point. And Condit is more of a fade, which is obviously the opposite. So that lines up kind of nicely. I mean, Condit's looked decent his last 2 times out, but like still controlled against Matt Brown. There's a chance that Griffin doesn't wrestle, like Ram said in the chat. There have been times where I'm yelling at the TV, like, Max, like, now would be the time, like, that shoot a takedown, buddy. I just think it's going to come so easy, right? Like, Carlos Condit, there's such a massive track record. It's not like Max Griffin. I mean, some fighters like don't watch tape on their opponents. They don't scout them. Don't get me started on that because I think it's like the dumbest thing in the world. But any fight fan who has grown up over the last, 15 years knows who Carlos Condit is and knows the holes in his game. It is not a secret. And Max Griffin is someone who, like, he's at the point in his career where, like, the time is now to make a real run for the top 15. I don't think he's ever going to be champ, probably not even top 10, but I mean, he's a legit talent. I think he's actually the better striker in this spot, and I trust him to push a pace. And I think what you mentioned in the past with Griffin kind of having up and down cardio is worthwhile, but at the same time, I think there's not going to be a point in this fight where Griffin is gassed or gassing and Condit is not. Like, if Griffin is slowing down, I think it's to me because he has pushed such a tremendous pace. And I know there's only a 2-year age difference, but you talked about fighting years. Like, Condit has been in some absolute wars. And I mean, Griffin has been in close fights, some, dodgy split decisions, but he's clearly the fighter, I think, with the better motor at this point, can dig deeper. So I trust Griffin to get it done. I would have gone bigger. I mean, this sounds stupid to say. Like, obviously, I would have gone bigger at a better line. I regret not getting in earlier on Max Griffin. But I think at this point, like a unit is fine. I think he deserves to be a bigger favorite than this. Condit's a dangerous guy. He'll throw up some subs off his back, but just the wrestling path feels so obvious for Griffin, and he would really have to be a colossal moron to fuck it up, which is possible. We'll see. All right. That does it for the prelims. Let's move on to our 5-fight main card for UFC 264. We will pretend that we weren't just trashing it 5 seconds ago. And now that we're free everywhere, we don't have to reintroduce the show. We don't have to reset everything. Nick in the chat, I didn't think this started till 9:30 Pacific time. I'm pissed. Fun fact, I am currently in Mountain Time. John, I don't even know what time zone John is in, but it's like 10 hours away. And we've been trying to schedule everything this week in Eastern Time, so I almost missed the show too, Nick. But we're glad you're here now. We have 5 fights left. We'll kick it off with a great matchup between Sean O'Malley, who comes in as a small minus 1,000 favorite, against Chris Moutinho, comes back plus 600 in his UFC debut, 6.7K for Moutinho. And John, I guess I'll let you go first on this one. I don't think there's a ton to say in terms of like analysis, but I do know that you have a bet on the fight, and I actually have some pretty decent size bets on the fight because considering how ridiculous of a money line this appears to be, I actually think there's value in the fight as weird as that sounds. So I'll kick it to you first here. First fight of the pay-per-view, O'Malley versus Moutinho.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say about this matchup? I mean, O'Malley, for some reason, like I never would have thought that he would have taken a fight like Ricky Simone. And then I'm like, as soon as I started hearing that, I'm like, there's no way that fight happens. And then, he releases the video and he's like, where are you at, Simon? And so I was like, I don't know. I just got sucked in and I was like, oh my God, this fight's going to happen. We're going to get plus money on Ricky Simone. It's going to be max bet season over here, but it obviously didn't happen. Simone wanted the fight at 140, I think, and O'Malley said no. Can't even blame him for saying no. And, in interviews, I guess he was quoted saying, like, what did Kill Sonnen say? Like, take the easiest fight take the lowest level fight on the highest part of the pay-per-view or something like that. So it makes total sense why he's doing this. It's a layup fight for him. Matino, I'm going to temper what I say about Matino because I believe he actually lives in my area in the States. So I don't want him coming.
You'll see him coming with the green hair.
Kicking, yeah, I don't want him showing up and kicking my ass or anything like that. So respect to him for being there, but this is a layup fight for Sean O'Malley. I think O'Malley wins whenever he wants in this fight. So I bet him by first round KO at plus 160. It really just depends if he wants to finish him in the first round or the second round. It all depends on what we see from O'Malley. I think we're going to see a highlight reel knockout either way, but plus 160 by knockout in the first round is the way that I played it. But I know you had another decent way to target this fight as well. And then I know my guy Johnny Football had a question in the chat. Once you go over your breakdown, we can address that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get to Johnny's comment. We were actually discussing something earlier today in the Discord. So I played the under 1.5 in this spot at minus 153. There's some minus 150s out there, but they were being pussies and limited me, so I had to get down in a few different places for this. But yeah, I got like minus 153 consensus price here in the under 1.5 rounds. I think you nailed it. Chris Moutinho, like the guy's getting his foot in the door. That's all you could say, right? Like he's going to get a second UFC fight. He gets to be the first fight on a Conor McGregor pay-per-view, and there's a 10% chance he wins the fight. And there might be a 60% chance he ends up on a highlight of some sort, but you take that upside. You cash the check. You cash another one after this. The thing in this fight is like you go back and watch Moutinho. I was thinking, maybe this is a kid 9-4 on the regionals, doesn't look that good. I hadn't heard of him. Went back and watched the tape. I mean, he's been knocked out in 2 of his last 4. He gets dropped like every single fight. I mean, he goes in there hands down, chin up. He's a tough guy, but like there's no amount of toughness that can really carry you against like a Sean O'Malley spin kick. And I'm not one of those people who's like a huge Sean O'Malley fanboy. Like I will be betting Ricky Simone against Sean O'Malley. I hope Sean O'Malley comes out and gets the highlight regardless of what I'm betting on this fight, just to fade him in the future. I don't think he's bad, but I think he's an elite level striker with a pretty unproven rest of his game. And I think he's going to get a striking match here against a guy who he is just levels and planets and universes ahead of in terms of the striking realm. So I know it's not some sort of hot take at minus 1,000. I also played O'Malley to win in round 1 plus 150 yesterday. There's this stupid thing in my head that I like can't get over where like I just think that O'Malley's gonna club and sub him, like just drop him with something ridiculous and then submit him and say something stupid like, and they said I couldn't wrestle or they said I couldn't grapple. Like I honestly think that's like a not impossible thing to happen here. So I just played round 1 for the safety. There's like a free $25 bet on FanDuel. I placed it on O'Malley submission round 1, like 27-1. In all seriousness, though, in terms of what Johnny Football said in the chat, we actually had Matty Muse, who I also see in the chat. He asked earlier today in the FTN Bets Discord, which is now free, by the way. So if you go to ftnbets.com, we're working on getting that integrated so everyone can get in there. So the previous subscribers know it's a great community. Everyone hangs out on fight night. We talk about live betting, different props. It's a super fun time. So definitely roll through there. But Matty Muse was asking me, he said, what do you make of O'Malley to win in rounds 1 or round 2 at minus 200? And I said FoxBet had a minus 167 the other day. And he said he had taken that previously already. Johnny Football's asking O'Malley in round 1 or round 2 at minus 200. I think that's value. Obviously I like the under 1.5 more. That's why I bet it. If you can get that minus 167, I'm not sure if it's still available at Fox, but I haven't checked since last night. I think that's worth a bet for sure. But round 1 and round 2 minus 200 is fine. I think like O'Malley likes to play with his food a little bit. Like he'll drop someone and let him back up, which is so tilting when you have these, unders. But the truth of the matter is like he might hit this kid and he's not getting up. Like he's just levels above. So I don't want to spend too much time on a minus 1,000. I think our opinions are pretty clear. Full transparency, I played the under 1.5 minus 153 for a unit and a half, and O'Malley in round 1 plus 150. Let's move on to our second fight of this pay-per-view. John, you sounded so excited for this fight earlier when we were chatting. We got Irene Aldana minus 120, 8.3K against Yana Kunitskaya plus 107.9K. I'll be honest, I don't have a ton here. I'll let you go first, and then I'll kind of give my take if I think you missed anything.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the banger fights.
All right, you want me to go first?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I mean, I think this is a fight that is pretty much a pass. I did consider backing Kunitskaya, but we're not even getting plus money on the dog here, and that's kind of what stopped me from doing it. I do think I would prefer her in terms of DraftKings just because she has more upside in terms of the control time. She's banked a few minutes of control time, at least a few minutes in most of her fights, and even a lot of control time in some of those. And so on the feet, where I think the striking could be pretty even, I think Aldana throws a lot more, but she's also a lot more hittable as well. So I think the striking could play out pretty even, but I definitely think Kunitskaya could bully her in the clinch, hold her up against the cage, and just play that normal stalling game plan like we've seen from her in the past. So it's like I think she could score okay as an underdog if she banks that control time. But at the same time, this is going to be a close decision more than likely. I'd be pretty surprised if we see a finish. I'd be really surprised if we see a finish either way. So I have Kunitskaya by decision as the official pick. But like I said, not a ton of interest in this outside of some shots on Kunitskaya on DraftKings, just because, if she holds Aldana in the clinch for 10 minutes, she's going to score okay in the mid-range. But yeah, it's not a fight that I think really anybody's excited about, but let me know if you have a different take either way.
Yeah, I don't really. I think there's danger to betting both sides. With Yana, we know she's going to come in and her main offense is pushing against the cage. I don't even think she has a ton of takedown upside. It's kind of funny going into that Holly Holm fight. Irene Aldana had 100% takedown defense. That was a main event, and they were trying to hype her up as the best takedown defense in UFC history, tied with John Jones and shit like that. And then she got thrashed by Holly Holm, which was not a great look. So I think there's danger in backing Irene Aldana just because she just got thrashed by, Holly Holm, and then she's going to get someone who's going to push her up against the cage. So I think the danger in backing Aldana is I think she's clearly the better striker, but the danger is she could lose a close decision here based on just getting held against the cage. And on the other side with Yana, I think that she has the ability to win minutes via cage push and thin margins like that, which are the last criteria within the scoring is octagon control. But I think she's going to lose in terms of damage to Aldana. So it's one of those things where I don't know, it's a close fight. It's not that I don't have a ton of interest in backing it. It's lined like a close fight. It is a close fight. I see danger for both women in terms of the way they can lose the fight. So I'm passing, no action for me. Next up, featured bout, and I don't know why the UFC keeps pushing this guy on us, but we got Greg Hardy plus 115 underdog, 7.8K to Tai Tuivasa minus 135, $8.4 thousand. John, you were complaining, so I'll go first here. This is not the type of fight that I really back often. They're heavyweights, they're one-dimensional heavyweights, they both hit hard. They're going to stand and bang really until one man falls. The one thing I will say is Tuivasa, I think, has a more well-rounded striking arsenal. We kind of seen this evolution of point fighting Hardy where he comes out and kicks the legs and tries to be competitive for the full 15 minutes. I think I'm comfortable saying he should just maximize his win condition by going out there and just trying to kill his opponents in the first 5 minutes because he doesn't have a ton of technical skill. I think Tuivasa is actually a way better kicker. I would not be surprised if he just comes out here and murks Hardy in the clinch and with kicks. So he deserves to be a favorite, but Hardy hits hard. I think both of these guys are capable of falling down really in any moment. I think the over 1.5 at even money was good, but limits were so low when that came out. It's obviously been steamed a ton. I see this as a heavyweight fight. Oftentimes when there's heavyweights, I say, I think if it goes over 7.5 minutes, it probably sees the bell because both guys gas out. It gets sloppy. The finishing upside is kind of gone. But we've seen both with Greg Hardy and the Maurice Green fight, which did that fight not end up going over? I think I backed the over and it lost. But it never really deserved to win. But Tuivasa a few times, we've seen these guys get past 7.5 minutes and then lose. I believe the Marcin Tybura a fight for Greg Hardy was one of those instances. So this is one of those where I actually think that a finish comes towards the back end. I don't really know who it is. I think Tuivasa deserves to be a small favorite. I said he is the more diverse striker, but to me, neither one of these guys is great. And I hope it gets over with quick, but not too quick. So it breaks the DraftKings slate and we can move on to some of the actual fun fights towards the back end of this card. So nothing for me here, John. Anything for you in this heavyweight matchup?
Yeah, I actually considered backing Greg Hardy here. Didn't end up doing it for multiple reasons. One, because fuck Greg Hardy, but two, it's just because I just think it's tough to back somebody who has so many glaring issues in their game. And it's not that Tuivasa doesn't. I think both guys do. You know, both guys, I think, have cardio issues. I think that's pretty clear. Hardy, I think, could win while the fight plays out at range. You know, he does have a decent jab, will throw leg kicks. Tuivasa, though, I think has more, like, I think Greg Hardy could be like the more technical striker, but the intangibles clearly favor Tuivasa in the sense that I think he has more finishing upside. I think he's more willing to actually go for a finish. I think he's more willing to dig deep. And I know that's like something you obviously can't, you can't quantify stuff like that, but it's like Greg Hardy, we've seen him quit. You know, he's been like, you put him in a bad spot, like he's going to look for a way out. Tuivasa, you know, he's been in bad spots and he's not going to quit. Like, you're going to have to put him out of there in order to finish him. And, you know, yeah, I think Greg Hardy does have the power to do that, but I trust Tuivasa to do that a little bit more. So it's like, at the end of the day, I think it's lined about right. You know, Greg Hardy could win a point fighting decision here, but Tuivasa, I just trust a little bit more to fight for my money, if that makes sense. So I think this fight kind of has a wide range of outcomes, which you alluded to. Like, both guys could win by knockout early. If that happens, they're going to score great in the mid-range. But outside of an early finish, you know, I think this could turn into a heavyweight slot fest where we get a winner that scores, 70, maybe not even 70 points. So in that sense, they could bust as well. So I think you can target this fight, but just temper your expectations, because this is not a fight that you want to stake your flag and then you end up seeing a sloppy, gassed out decision where the winner doesn't score well at all. So I think this one, it can kind of go both ways. So we'll see where ownership shakes out later in the week. But yeah, I think I think you should have exposure to both sides. Just don't get a little too crazy here.
Yeah, I think I'll probably get a little underweight. I just like, it's one of those things where it's a heavyweight fight that I think goes over 7.5 minutes. And like, even if you get a round 3 KO, which is 50 points on DK, there's probably not going to be that many points before that unless someone gets multiple knockdowns. So I think this is a decent fight. Everyone loves targeting the big boys. Greg Hardy is a big name, for better or worse. He's a big name on a fight card that attracts a lot of casuals to be not only watching, but playing DFS, bigger contests, that kind of stuff. I'm going to be underweight, I should say, on both sides, but I do like Tuivasa to win the fight. So let's move on to the co-main event here. This is actually my biggest bet on the card. We have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's currently minus 155, 8.5K on DraftKings against Gilbert Burns, plus 135, 7.7K for Gilbert. I'm a Wonderboy pretty big here. I played him at minus 135, 2.5 units, so a near max bet for me. I just think this is a great stylistic matchup for a guy in Wonderboy who, I think we comfortably know what Wonderboy is at this point in his career. He has that style with his hands down, karate-based. He's coming in there, really going to kick you at every opportunity. More of a counter striker, doesn't love to go first. And I think with Gilbert Burns, there's kind of this, I think there's kind of a false narrative around this guy. Props to him for being an action fighter who made his way to the top and got that title fight against Kamaru Usman in February of this year. But if you look at the guys that Gilbert beat to get there, I just think he had some fortunate matchmaking. And this is not to say he's not a dangerous fighter. It's not to say he isn't a good fighter. But I mean, I literally think the best win on his title run was Mike Davis. And Mike Davis is cool. He has put on some great fights. He's a good athlete. He's a young guy. But if you look at the wins for Gilbert Burns, I mean, the first one was OAM, not in the UFC anymore, but decently skilled guy. Mike Davis, talked about him. Alexei Kunchenko, at one point, a really good fighter, then got old and was never really a great matchup for Gilbert Burns. Gunnar Nelson, not a great win for Gilbert Burns, like a pretty sketchy fight, I would say. And Gunnar Nelson also hasn't fought in forever, hasn't won in forever. Damian Maia, I think we saw what Damian Maia looked like against Bilal Muhammad. Damian Maia is clearly not what he once was. And then Tyron Woodley, I mean, he's off boxing Jake Paul or whatever. We know what happened with Tyron Woodley's career. So it's not that I think Burns is bad. I just think that his kind of climb to the top, whereas Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, we know he belongs at this level. He's beaten so many top guys. I mean, he's outclassed Jorge Masvidal. he beat Darren Till, in my opinion. Jeff Neal went out there and styled on him in his last fight. Vicente Luque, who's one of the most dangerous guys in MMA. I mean, Burns and Luque, I think, are similar fighters. I think Burns is a better grappler and probably just better at everything. But we saw like Stephen Thompson's just on a different level than these guys. And in terms of stylistics, I think it's easy to say, oh, this is a striker versus a grappler. If Burns did get takedowns, he wins. And while I don't necessarily disagree with that, and Wonderboy's takedown defense is, it's strong. It's 80%. But we haven't really seen anyone. There's not a ton of footage of like Thompson defending single legs or someone getting in deep on a double leg and him sprawling. He has a decent sprawl, but really what makes Wonderboy so hard to take down is the fact that he moves so much and it's all lateral movement. It's really hard to get a hold of him. And Gilbert Burns is explosive early in fights. We saw it against Usman where he had a flash of success, but he really doesn't have great cardio and he's fragile. I mean, Gilbert Burns is not he's not someone who does not get hurt in fights, right? Like he is very susceptible to getting hurt. And I just think that Wonderboy is such a pristine striker that it's tough. Gilbert's going to be running, chasing him, and Thompson's just going to be able to counter strike his way for 15 minutes. And I honestly think he could find a finish a strong percentage of the time. So in terms of DK, I think both guys have finishing upside. I acknowledge that Burns is a dangerous fighter, at least for the first half of a fight. I just don't see him being able to grab a hold of Stephen Thompson and then get him down and then probably submit him. And on the feet, Thompson isn't the highest volume guy in the world, but he wins decently obvious against guys he's a better striker than. I know there's the Tyron Woodley fights we could all point to, low volume, went to decision. There's the Darren Till fight where he got robbed overseas, obviously. But like, we've seen it. I think this is more of a Vicente Luque style thing where Burns is chasing him around, tough guy, trying to bull his way into the pocket, trying to close distance, and Wonderboy just teeps him away, lands spin kicks to the body. I just think Gilbert Burns, stylistically, this is a really tough matchup for a guy who I think is a significantly worse fighter than Wonderboy. So I got in at minus 135. That's obviously moved 20 cents. The market's been bouncing around. I would enter at minus 155 because I saw a minus 170 yesterday for Wonderboy. I know there's a minus 154 on FanDuel. So I've talked for a hot minute. I clearly have made it obvious that this is my favorite spot on the card. So John, am I crazy? Are you backing the other side here? Do you feel less strongly than I do, but also backing Wonderboy? I'm really curious your thoughts on this fight because I bet at minus 135 expecting a ton of CLV. And I mean, I've gotten it to some extent, but there's a lot more people on Gilbert Burns than I expected this week, and I just don't see the angles. I've tried to see it, obviously, and I just can't. So maybe you can talk me into it a little bit, but let me know what you're thinking here.
Yeah, so I originally thought I was going to place a big bet on Wonderboy coming into this week, and the more I looked into the matchup, the more that. Not that I'm still considering placing a bet on him at the current line. It's just like there was some pause for me just because I backed him against Jeff Neal. I know you did too. You mentioned the Vicente Luque fight. Like those were fights where, it's obvious why Tyron Woodley and Darren Till, like those style of fights are going to be like low volume, boring fights because Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he wants to sit back and let his opponents come forward and he will counter strike them all day long. And we saw it in the Jeff Neal fight, like absolute masterclass performance there. Vicente Luque, same thing. Like that could be similar to this in a sense that Gilbert Burns is going to come forward and he is outmatched on the feet. So that part of me thinks, if this fight plays out like that, Wonderboy is going to look like a minus 300 favorite, no doubt about it. And where I have some concern is, or what really makes me pause from just hammering Wonderboy is Burns does have legitimate like early upside in terms of his striking. We saw him stun Kamaru Usman early, like drop Damian Maia. Like we know he has power. Like there's no doubt about it. He's got explosive power, but he won't have that for long. So he probably has like a 4 to 5 minute window to land something heavy. And it's just like Wonderboy is getting older. The knockout from Anthony Pettis, that's still kind of in the back of my mind. If we do start to see that durability come into question, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing if Burns did drop him early. Theoretically, Burns could have some wrestling upside. If he gets him down, he'll have some grappling upside. I'm not convinced he could get him down, but I also wouldn't be like super shocked if he did either. So those were just kind of why I paused on Wonderboy, But like you said, I mean, I think you laid out a good case for him. I'm still considering that might be an ad for me by Saturday, just because, there is a path for sure where Thompson looks like a -300 favorite here. Burns doesn't hit his win condition early, isn't able to land takedowns, and just gets stuck at range. And in that event, I think Thompson looks like a massive favorite here. So in terms of DraftKings, I think you could probably target both sides, but I'd be a little nervous if you were going too heavy on the Burns side, just because I do think more than likely he gets stuck in a striking match here where he's outgunned on the feet. So give me Wonder Boy. I'm on the Wonder Boy side as well. And that's my take on this fight. Yeah.
And just to add on one more thing here, in terms of the DFS side, like Wonder Boy, I think could win 30-27 and look -300 and still only get 100 significant strikes in a decision win. So I wouldn't be like massively overweight on him. Although I do think like Gilbert Burns kind of is fragile and will get himself finished. And it's just one of those things where I think we see the fight similarly. I think Burns is a slightly worse wrestler than you, and I think he needs more wrestling to win the fight, is basically what it comes down to. And that's why I'm higher on Wonder Boy than you are. But it sounds like we both think Stephen Thompson comes out here, gets the W in the co-main. All right, that's 12 fights. Enough of all that. Let's get to what the people are here for in the main event of the evening, the trilogy going down this Saturday night. We got Dustin the Diamond Poirier. He's -125, $8,100 coming off of his knockout victory over the Notorious One. Conor McGregor comes back +105, underdog price tag for Conor McGregor this weekend. He's also $8,100 on DraftKings. They've priced both fighters at the same exact price range. They sometimes do that when we have a larger slate with a semi-even main event. So I think that'll be interesting how the ownership goes, because I usually think there's like a McGregor tax if you play Conor, right? Like anyone who's firing one team in the $25 is playing Conor for the most part. But at the same time, there's line value. Like Dustin is implied to win the fight, whatever, 56% of the time, and is the same price as Conor. So I think that's interesting, and we'll talk about that in terms of DFS. I went first on the last fight. I promised everyone that I would try to let you talk with one of Conor's nuts in your mouth. So I won't tee it up much more than that. Tell me, what are you thinking about the fight here, the trilogy going down on Saturday night?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think regardless of what I say, it's just going to come down to, oh, you're such a Conor fanboy, which, like, who cares? Like, you're allowed to be fans of fighters. Like, I'm a huge fan of Ryan Hall as well. No surprise there. I'm a fan of a lot of fighters. But obviously, like, the thing with Conor, because he's such a polarizing figure, people just get fired up, which I love. So that's why, I'm in the Twitter 100%. Streets, just stirring the pot a little bit, getting the people going. But I honestly, when I break down fights, like, I do keep like the fandom aside, and really the best way to attack this fight, and I've said this all week, is if you like the Conor side, you bet him to win inside the first round. If you like the Dustin Poirier side, you wait for a live betting spot after he likely loses the first round, because you're going to get a better number than -125. You're probably going to get plus number for Dustin Poirier live after round one if he stays alive. Like, that's just, it seems so clear to me, because especially this at this stage in Conor's career, like, I seriously doubt he's going to go 5 rounds and go to absolute war with Dustin Poirier like some of these other fighters have done. Like, I just don't think Conor's fighting style is just not going to do that. And, going back to the last matchup, like, yes, he landed some big shots early. He looked pretty good early, but those leg kicks were starting to add up. Dustin was getting his timing down close to the end of the first round. And then in the second, caught him with the hook. The leg was pretty bad as well. That type of stuff adds up. And then you factor in, he's got the ability to land takedowns as well. Even if he can't do much with them, Conor looked pretty good battling back to his feet in that matchup. But it's just like Dustin Poirier, I think if the longer the fight goes, I think you have to favor him. It's just that where people struggle is like how much first round win equity or second round win equity do you give to Conor? It's like that same argument we always have with guys like Francis Ngannou, Davison Figueiredo. Like, the market is sort of like, they don't know where to accurately price them, because their early win equity is so high, but outside of that window, it starts to really drop off. And I would say that about Conor, just because his cardio is not as good as Dustin Poirier. I think that's pretty clear. And, Dustin has shown good durability, but Conor's Say what you want about the first fight. He did knock him out. I didn't think it was back of the head. He looked like he hit some ear to me, which is a legal strike. But regardless, he's one of the hardest punchers in the division. He's one of the best knockout artists in the UFC. He's tied for the most knockdowns in the division as well. So Conor's going to do what Conor can do to win the fight early in the first round. Still will carry power in the second, but I think if it gets outside of the first round, then you really start to get nervous on Conor. So that's why I say the best way to attack it is by first round KO, which I backed at plus 390. It's actually moved against me a decent amount. There's also some good promos out there. I think FanDuel's doing one for Conor. I'm not sure if DraftKings is as well. But if you target the KO1 prop and then Conor looks good but doesn't get the first round knockout, and it's starting to sort of like the last matchup shift over to Dustin Poirier, you can hop on Poirier live and get some plus money there as well. So I think that's the pretty clear way to target it. I went with the Conor side, but I'm not going to knock anybody for hopping on Dustin live. I just think that's a way better way to do it than backing him at the current money line as a small favorite here.
Yeah, I think you make a ton of good points. And in all seriousness, I mean, that's a good fight breakdown. I make jokes about you being a Conor fanboy. I think Conor's a polarizing figure, obviously. I mean, we have people trying to convince me this week that he's like a better submission or a better grappler than Dustin because he got up in the first fight. Like, it doesn't matter if he's a better grappler in wrestling practice because he's not going to win minutes wrestling, and Dustin actually can. I did bet like Dustin today to land a takedown at minus 115. I think that's good. Before I start the breakdown, I mean, if you're not betting the over on Bruce Buffer's intros lasting 160 seconds or more, you're doing it wrong. I went back, I watched some tape on that. Bruce is going over 3 minutes. It's a lock over 180 seconds. You got like 25 seconds to spare on that number. But in all seriousness, in terms of how the fight breaks down, I think you make a lot of good points, right? Like, and I knew you would going first because I think your breakdown of it has to be Conor early, or it doesn't have to be Conor early, but Conor's best win condition comes early and then Dustin takes over late. I think that's a good one, and I think it's kind of the correct way to approach the fight. The one thing I will say is in the first fight, we had Conor minus 300 on Fight Night just about. After the first round, he wins the first round unanimously. I don't think there was much debate about it. I think everyone watched the round, thought he won, but it was clear that things were not necessarily headed south, but for someone who hadn't been out of the first round in a long time, has historically been a front runner, there was adversity he was going to face, and he was still minus 350 live after the first round. I do not necessarily think that will be the case here. Like, I think if that first round is repeated, and take away the leg kicks, right? It's just repeated, and it's clear that Conor's going to have to deal with some adversity. I don't think it's going to be Dustin minus 120 the same way it is. I think the market will have caught on to the fact that Dustin is going to be the better guy going down the stretch, and that doesn't mean you can't bet Dustin live. I just don't think it's a lock that Dustin's going to be plus 125 after a competitive first round. I think Conor wins the first round. There's a decent chance you get Dustin plus money, but I also like if Dustin's minus 150 after round one, there can still be value on a favorite live, and you took away the biggest risk, which we all seem to think is him losing in the first round. So I think that betting Dustin live is kind of interesting any way you look at it, and I don't think it has to be as an underdog, and I don't think he loses the first round 100% of the time. In terms of Conor, there's all sorts of narratives, right? Like the guy's one win at 155 pounds. He's one in two over his last three. He doesn't have a legitimate win at 155 since 2016. I think it's fair to think he might not be what he once was, but he's still a very dangerous fighter for that early period of time in the fight. And I think that you get a lot of conflicting takes as well when you talk about Conor's cardio, because on one hand, like in that Diaz rematch, his best round of the fight, I mean, he looked dead on the stool at the end of round 3. And after the way he lost the first Diaz fight, I think it was very fair to say, like, anyone watching that fight was like, Conor's fucked. I mean, he needed like an oxygen mask ASAP on the stool. He was in bad shape. It didn't look like he was, hearing anything his corner was saying to him. He comes out there, wins round 4, obviously comes out there. And that's like a massive victory against Nate, who historically is one of the best cardio fighters in the world. We just saw that against Leon Edwards. But on the other hand, like, he unanimously lost round 5, and he was up 3-1, so you can afford to lose the round as long as you don't get finished. Same thing with Khabib. The worst round of Khabib's career, probably outside like the T-Bow fight, if you go back and watch that, like, Conor won round 3 pretty convincingly against Khabib in that fight. He goes and gets finished in round 4. So it's one of those things where the biggest, I think positives in terms of how he faces adversity are there, but the negatives come soon after. So I don't think it's 100% Conor will gas, Conor fades down the stretch, but I also don't think it's 100%, oh, everyone's, overhyping that sort of narrative, because I do think that there's a legitimate chance that Conor gasses down the stretch. And kind of regardless of what you think, Dustin Poirier, I think, is 11-2 in fights that leave the first 7.5 minutes. Conor is 4-3. You look at that compared to the rest of their careers, it is clear that Dustin gets stronger as fights goes on. And I think he's capable of winning early. I think he's capable of winning late. I said a lot. I have not said my pick. I'm going to pick Dustin by knockout. I think he gets it done in the second or third round, but I'm going to be in no way shocked if Conor wins in round 1, and I won't even be shocked if he wins in round 3 or round 4. I think this is a pretty evenly matched fight. Dustin has shown us more recently. I think he has more ways to win rounds over the course of the fight. So I think he deserves to be a small favorite. I would bet Dustin on the money line if he was like plus 105, plus 110. I'll bet Conor if he gets to plus 150, plus 140. I don't think he will. I think some casual money will come in on Conor towards fight day, but it's passed for me pre-fight. I do think the under 2.5 is mildly interesting, right? Like we have a small sample of these guys fighting. It went under 2.5. Both times, obviously. I think there was a minus 120 I saw earlier today on under 2.5. I think that's decent because it captures a lot of Conor's upside in a win, and it also captures the way downside where it's like this guy just got knocked out 7 months ago. He has one win at 155 and it was in 2016. So I think that the under kind of covers the volatility in both directions. But the problem with the under is I think the most likely outcome is Dustin starts putting it on in the middle towards the later round. So I might play the under 2.5. It won't be anything massive from me. But if I do have a play on the fight, that is what it'll be. John, do you have anything to add really on the main event there before we start wrapping this one up?
Yeah, I think that was a really good breakdown. The only thing I'll add is I think where I disagree the most, or where I'd caution people is I know there's a lot of people that it's this fight's just going to play out the same exact way, and Dustin Poirier is the lock of the year. And I'd be pretty shocked if it played out exactly like the first fight. We saw a pretty, I think a watered down version of Conor. He didn't come in looking like himself in a sense, just because it was a super boxing heavy approach, didn't even acknowledge a single leg kick until the second round. He didn't throw a leg kick until 30 seconds left in the first round. If you watch all of Conor's fights before that, the reason why he's such a dangerous striker is because you never know what's coming at you. Hook kicks, spinning back kicks, punches. He's so diverse with his attack. And in this Poirier fight, it literally was, I'm going to stand in front of you, walk forward, and box you. And his boxing is good enough.
The first Nate fight, that's what it was like as well. The first Nate fight. Exactly. And he's good enough with his boxing against some opponents where he can get away with, getting his leg beat up a few times, eating a couple 3 or 4 leg kicks because he's dangerous enough with his boxing to win by early finish. So if somebody survives that, and then it's oh shit, I probably should have checked some of those leg kicks earlier. And then even in the second round, you saw the adjustments being made. He started to mix it up. You saw a lot more kicks in the second round after not even throwing one until 30 seconds left in the first round. You saw him catching the low kicks of Dustin and trying to return fire and punish him for those kicks. That's all stuff that he was not doing in the first round. If you don't think he's going to come in with a better game plan this time around, I think that's pretty stupid, honestly. It's silly. And, he's surrounded by a camp that is solely around him. And I think we all know that. But the camp has made adjustments before in the second Nate fight. They kicked the legs more. They had a lot of success doing that down the stretch. So I do think it goes without saying Conor's going to come with a better game plan. Will that make him a better man than Dustin Poirier? I mean, that's why we're all paying or streaming the fight on Saturday night. So look, he made the adjustments in the first fight, or tried to. It was just too late. So that does it for us. That's 13 fights, UFC 264, under an hour and a half from the boys here. We do just quickly want to point out, I'm going to toss it over to John to close as we always do, but everything is free now on FTN. So ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com. John's articles will be out, or are out. My articles will be out later tonight in terms of my best bets for the card. You can basically get all the content from watching the show, but if you want it in a written form, we can do that. The podcast will be out everywhere it normally is. And the one thing I really want to plug before we dip is our Discord is awesome. I mean, so the people that have subscribed over the last 13 months, and paid for content. Like, we really appreciate that. And the community over there is awesome. And it's only going to get better with more people. So I personally am really looking forward to that. The Discord is up top at ftnbets.com, ftndaily.com. If you need any help getting in there, just DM me or John on Twitter. I'm happy to do that. That's something I feel really strongly about and something that's a great part of our community. So, John, I'll toss it over to you to take us out of here, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, that's it, guys. Like you said, this video will be up on iTunes, Spotify, any place where you listen to podcasts. It'll be up on YouTube as well. Really appreciate you guys coming out and joining us for what should be an awesome card, UFC 264 on Saturday. Like you said, all of our stuff's up at ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com, all outside of the paywall moving forward. So definitely check that out. We definitely appreciate the support. But that's going to do it here for me and Jonah. I'm John Kelly. That's Jonah Shiffman. This is the Undisputed MMA Show presented by the FTN Network, saying goodbye and good luck, and we will see you guys next time.